Okay, there we go. I see it now.
All right.
All right, cool. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. I'm really excited to be working with everyone again. This is, gosh, it's been probably 3 or 4 years since Dr. G and I have taught both 506 and 547 together. So it'll be really nice. You know, we both know exactly where everyone was coming out of 506, and we know where you are coming into 547, and what we're going to need to focus on, what we can really hit hard, and what we're going to need to spend a little bit more time on. So I think that you guys are in for a really good semester. We have a bit of a smaller cohort this year, which is going to allow for more discussion. It's going to allow for more opportunity for us to have more in-depth conversations on some of the topics that we'll be focusing on this semester, which is really, really good. Just as last semester was the first time that we had taught Psych 506 under kind of the new ABAI BACB guidelines, the same is going to go for EDCI 547 this semester. So this is there's a little bit less change in the content from what we've taught in the past, but you guys are coming into this class with a more in-depth understanding in some areas and a little bit less in-depth understanding in others, not as a function of how you guys performed or did not perform in semester 1, but rather what you were asked to perform on. So as we stand here today, your background in concepts and principles is much more robust than what we have started this semester off with in the past. And I'll talk about why that's such a good thing in a little bit. What we sacrificed there a little bit was your kind of more academic understanding of data collection and analysis, and kind of the more experimental aspects of ABA and what goes into a project, into a research report, into kind of that higher level decision making that you're going to be really getting a double dose of between this class and 539 with Dr. Cohane. So I'm excited because in the past, when we've started this course, I've chosen to start off with a little bit of a soliloquy about the importance of concepts and principles. When we've taught Psych 506 in the past, I think I mentioned this last semester, it was like week 7 or 8 by the time we mentioned positive reinforcement, whereas that was week 2 for you guys. So right from the start, you guys were immersed in what the principles of the science really are. We talked about extinction, we talked about shaping, we talked about differential reinforcement, we talked about all of these underlying concepts, where in the past, that was almost secondary to what that whole class is supposed to be. And the result of that was when we got to this class, which is all about tactics and interventions, people were like, yes, now I actually get to learn what I do in a clinic or in a classroom. Whereas for you guys, I think you're in a position to understand that you've already learned those things. You've already learned that you utilize positive reinforcement across everything in your clinics and classrooms with your clients. You utilize shaping, you utilize differential, you utilize all of these principles. And now what we're going to be focusing on this semester is how do we systematically implement those in what have been come to known as tactics and interventions. So this semester is going to be all about the research-based topographies of how we implement those principles and concepts. Does that make sense? So what we are going to spend all semester talking about are different forms for implementing what we talked about all of last semester. And I think you guys are in a really, really strong position to be able to understand the 15 different types of positive reinforcement interventions we're going to focus on, and the 6 different types of extinction procedures we're going to talk about, and so on and so forth, right? Where we did not focus as much last semester was on the data collection projects and the analysis and the research piece. And this semester, as we are talking about these interventions, we are going to be asking you to implement them and take systematic data, not take data, but take systematic data and do systematic reviews so that you understand what you are doing and why you're doing it, what the research says about it. Write up your procedures, write up your results, analyze your results, and really come forward with these multiple projects that are going to demonstrate an in-depth understanding of the topics that we are covering. So we're going to talk about that in even more detail in just a little bit. But I'm really excited to see how this new format across the 2 semesters both helps and hinders what you guys are able to demonstrate this semester. So this semester really is all about the different tools that we use in our clinics, in our classroom, to implement behavior analysis, with the understanding that what we learned last semester, what we focused on last semester, is the engine that makes everything go. All right? Cool. Kick it back over to you.
So I think when you're thinking about what you need to be thinking about throughout this entire course, you really have to take what you learned last semester in regards to the principles, and when you are analyzing and solving a problem, whether you're trying to teach something or induce something or reduce something, and you're using an intervention, you have to think systematically. And you should always be thinking about, this is my tactic and it's related to this principle and that's related to this problem. And I know that through an analysis, not through your opinion, what someone told you to do, flipping a coin, the phase of the moon, or anything like that. You really have to think in terms of those systemized types of processes. And I would challenge that if you're not doing that, then you are very far from engaging in behavior analytic activities. So there always has to be a tactic that's related to a principle, and those things fit together hand in glove. Let's kind of think about this for right now. If positive reinforcement is the principle, what might be one tactic that is associated with positive reinforcement? Can anybody tell me, either vocally or in the chat room?
Tokens.
Okay, token economy, that is a tactic that's related to the principle of positive reinforcement. Good job, CC. And obviously, there's a ton of variations in terms of token economies. So that's one tactic with numerous variations, right? If we're talking about a punishment procedure as a principle, punishment as a principle, then what could be a tactic that we use every day related to a punishment procedure, whether you realize it or not. Any type of correction procedure would be a tactic related to a punishment procedure. And so we should be able to go through all of our principles and have a litany of tactics out there that attach to those principles. And there are some that kind of defy those rules. So for example, the Premack principle is a principle and it's a tactic at the same time. All right. Now it's based on positive and negative reinforcement. But with that said, it is still considered a principle in and of itself. So there are a few caveats and exceptions, and don't get caught in the weeds with that. If you can't figure out what the principle is related to the tactic, I think that should result in a pause for you. And you should try to figure that out and analyze it. You need to think it through, because it's the disconnect between principles and tactics that leads people astray. It leads you to a place where you're no longer engaging in science, and that's going to minimize the effectiveness of the treatment, right? So think about this. Your car might be the way to get somewhere. Well, you can push the car to get somewhere, right? You can get another car to push that car to push you to get somewhere. I think there's lots of things we could do to make the car move, right? But the best way known to us right now is getting in that car, making sure we have gas, starting the engine, and pressing the accelerator. All right, so don't get lulled into thinking, oh, I've been using this tactic and it works, so I'm going to keep using it. That might be the case. But if you can't analyze what's happening and then determine what the principle is, that may be the case. However, there may be a better way to get there, and you're not going to know that. So don't always be fooled in thinking you did X and Y happened, and that was a function of it. We don't know that. And that's one reason why, getting fluent with the scientific processes is really critical to being able to answer that question. And that is what you want to answer this semester. If you put in a tactic, is the change in what happened a function of that tactic? And can we determine what is it attached to in terms of a behavioral principle? Because if not, then we're just kind of doing witchcraft or snake oil at that point, right? If it's not attached to science, then it's attached to something else. And that's the opposite of what we're doing. All right, so that's
How many of you have been in a situation, sorry, how many of you have been in a situation where you've implemented a tactic and it has not been successful? Everyone should probably raise their hand, right? When that has been the case, and you don't have to respond and out your supervisors, but how many of you, again, don't respond, but can think of a time where the conversation that followed that tactic being unsuccessful was trying to either change the tactic or tweak the tactic in some way without a discussion of, are we sure we're using the right family of tactics? Does that make sense? What happens a lot of times is when tactics don't work, we start to lose sight of where we were going, why we were going there, and we start to kind of chase the tactic. and try to get the tactic to do something functionally, as opposed to doing the thing that we wanted it to do in the first place. All right. I don't know if this has been researched out or if this is just a mantra of Dr. Shanman. But one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that there are only two ways a tactic is not successful. All right. Only two ways. The first is if you are implementing the tactic incorrectly. The second is if you selected a tactic based on the wrong principle to change the target behavior. If you selected a tactic based on the appropriate principle and you implement that tactic correctly, you will see the behavior change that you want to see. That does not mean that there isn't a more efficient way or a more effective way. But it does mean that if it's not working, you did something wrong. And it's in the analysis of that, it's so important to remember to step backwards and say, okay, you know, we put in planned ignoring. Are we trying to put a behavior on extinction? Are we trying to put an attention-seeking behavior on extinction? If not, we need to do something else. How many of you have run a planned ignoring procedure just to realize well later on that you are dealing with an escape behavior? And you're reinforcing that escape behavior, right? The wrong principle is being used, okay? So while this is a focus on tactics, this class is all focused where we're going to talk about intervention after intervention after intervention after intervention, or families of interventions, I should say. We should not have a single one of those conversations without relating it back to the principles that those interventions are based off of. All right, that's again, the relation between Psych 506 and this course, the strength that you guys have and what we're going to be focusing on. It all really comes to a head here. The other thing that I wanted to say, and I think Dr. G's example of the punishment procedure was really apt, and the fact that you guys all kind of had that deer in headlights moment of, we don't use punishment every day. What are you talking about, right? We use reinforcement all the time, everywhere, right? By putting together all these tactics, I want you to be able to see two things throughout the semester. One, I want you to be able to truly understand how every aspect of what you are doing throughout the day is a tactic in some way. A tactic does not have to be something that we intentionally put in because the learn unit isn't working. One, our tactics involve learn units. Two, the learn unit is a tactic, right? Number two, I want you to be able to start to see how through tactics, multiple principles interact. It's not just positive reinforcement on its own does not win the day. It's positive reinforcement in conjunction with, in conjunction with, in conjunction with, in conjunction with. And it's actually all those other in conjunction withs that make positive reinforcement so effective. Okay.
When you think about this, I'm really glad that Dr. Shinman said this. When you think about one of the terms in ABA, an operant, it's how behavior acts on its environment and vice versa, right? So nothing happens in a vacuum. The operant is formed because of all of those things. And so sometimes you have more than one thing contacting the behavior when it occurs. And you have to be able to see that, sometimes literally see that. But that certainly is encompassed in the realm of possibility. I just think that, the more people try to look at ABA as a methodology and not as something that is happening all the time is where part of the problem lies. Because you'll get people that will say, well, I don't believe in any of that ABA stuff. It's not an option, right? The principles are at play with all of us and everyone we see all of the time. And I think that was really important for me. That was kind of an aha moment for me, realizing that when someone buys fruit in a grocery store, when they're deciding on what fruit to buy and all of those things, there's principles of behavior that are at play there. So you can't escape it. However, if you put it in a silo and you try to reduce everything out of it, it's going to lead you to believe that there is a single solitary force that is actually a predictor of the behavior, and that's not necessarily the case. So what Dr. Shannon said, I think needs to be highlighted, underscored, in whatever color you use to highlight. I just think it's that important. Also keep in mind, and this was kind of on my list of things I wanted you to take away from tonight, just to put yourself in a framework where you're trying to, I guess, get a snapshot of what to expect this semester. I think in a lot of ways, out of the starting gate, this can appear to be a very easy class because you've learned about what hoops you need to jump through. You've learned how to do a research summary. You've done a data collection. You have gone through BDS modules. All of that is replicated in this course. You do research summaries, you're doing a data collection, you're doing the BDS modules. So having to actually be a new student and learning the framework of all of that, you're done with that, right? But one of the differences is that the quality of your research summaries should be better. The sophistication of your data collections should be better. Your confidence with the BDS modules should be better. So that kind of makes it hard again, right? So what you can expect in terms of new stuff would probably be less this semester, but you've got to put this in another gear in order to really get the most out of it. And I want you to keep that in mind. When you're reflecting on your own behavior, I want you to think, wow, I didn't spend 2 hours trying to figure out how to do a research summary, but I spent 2 hours on analyzing the information in this article because I know more. I can analyze more because I know more. And I think that's an important takeaway for tonight to set the tone for the rest of the semester. Okay.
Does anyone have any questions so far, or thoughts, or not? We're gonna go over the different kind of assignments and components, but I want to make sure that you guys, based on that quick-ish intro, if you feel confident in where we're going this semester. Any thoughts, any comments, anything?
Something.
I'm just seeing, Taylor, your comment related to what we were talking about before. And Taylor, that you hit the nail on the head there in terms of losing sight of the of long-term objectives or short-term objectives, and we focus more on the success of the tactic, right? Where you put in the tactic to support the tactic to support the tactic, instead of saying, I just need to learn this kid to learn what the color red is. So yeah, that's really
Or take it a step above that, Dr. Shannon. you know, they might not need to learn what the color red is, but I need to make sure that the child should be discriminating different things in their environment.
Yeah, that's even better, even better, even
Doesn't
better.
matter. And if they're not discriminating, it's going to be hard for them to have um, a life where they can participate
Yeah,
in anything,
yeah.
right? Well, let's, I guess, talk about your selected reading presentations, because this is something that is new, but it's also something that I think is really important and helpful as you develop your skill set. So as you can tell, when you go through everything week by week, there are some readings. Some of them are chapter-based from DTS. Some of them are excerpts from books or articles that we have compiled for you that are separate and apart from research summaries or annotated bibliographies or anything like that. They cover part of the content that we're trying to cover with you. So the likelihood of you reading all of those supplemental articles is next to none, like nil, very minute. But if you actually can take one of those and look at it in detail, and then turn that into some type of presentation. Generally speaking, what I mean is a PowerPoint that's about 10 slides with not a whole lot of text, but a way of conveying that you're knowledgeable about the subject matter. If everyone does that, which is in essence a summary of the reading, and you guys engage in reading those summaries, now the likelihood of you coming in contact with that information has just quadrupled, probably. So the other piece is that it teaches you how to summarize something that could potentially be shared with staff that you're going to eventually train. Right? You have to learn how to do that. You're not going to take a course in how to train staff. But what you are going to do is engage in some of those activities embedded across all of your courses that at the end of the day will be your skill set on how to train staff. So I do think this exercise ticks all the boxes. You have to pick one of the readings that we have listed and across the 15 weeks. You have to sign up for it just to make sure that we don't have too many people signing up for the same one. Take it, develop a PowerPoint for it, and you're going to submit that, and that is your activity. You're not going to necessarily be presenting that in class. So what are we looking for on the summaries, on the PowerPoints? Clarify. So when you, after you select your topic and you're going to do a PowerPoint on that reading, what we're looking for is that your PowerPoint conveys accurate knowledge about the selected reading that you did. Secondly, a concise translation of that information. So we don't want every word that's in the text or every word that's in the passage. We want to see you use your own words and stick to the vocabulary of the science, of course, and convey to the reader, which right now would be Dr. Shannon, myself, and all of your classmates, what did you glean from this reading? And so that's tremendously important. It takes some practice to do that. And just keep in mind that including everything is not going to be helpful to the reader, right? So that's what it needs to look like. We kind of modeled one for you with some of the information we're sharing with you tonight on chapter 1. If you pick chapter 1 to sign up for, you have to do it right away, number 1. But number 2, just be creative with it. Obviously, we don't want you to do exactly what we did. And there's some movement within that. Just because you have some different things or you have them worded differently or presented differently doesn't mean that it can't convey the meaning. So don't be afraid of doing that. Again, I'd stick to the scientific vocabulary and use your narrative to get the points through, but don't do things like, well, they talked about reinforcement, so I'm going to use rewards. Well, no, those are not the same things. There's a reason why certain terms are selected, because they only mean certain things. They don't mean like other things. If they would mean like other things, we would call it those other things. All right. There's really not a lot of use of meaningless jargon in ABA. There's scientifically specific vocabulary that's used for certain reasons. So keep that in mind. I think that's really important. So that is basically what the selected reading presentations are like. It is perfectly fine if more than one person selects the same reading. That's fine. Don't worry about that. When possible, try to distribute what you're going to take on a little bit if that's possible. So meaning if nobody did any of the selected readings at the end of the semester, that might be one you want to sign up for. And again, the idea is not for you to the idea is not for you to read all of them. It's to kind of find something that might seem interesting. And I always tell people, interesting for me is, I kind of don't know that much about this thing. So that must mean I need to know about it. So I'm interested in knowing more. That's why I'm going to pick a topic. If it's something you are very fluent on, I'm not so sure that that's going to be a good use of your time to pick that topic, right? Because you're going to lose the opportunity to learn something new. And that might be a vulnerable position to put yourself in, but I think that it is necessary. You want to make yourself as vulnerable as possible as a graduate student, meaning uncomfortable, learn something new, expose what you don't know, tackle things that are difficult. Because once you're out of graduate school, you don't have a whole lot of time to do those things, right? You got to produce results. So unless you've done that as a graduate student, you're going to be limited with your skill set. So don't get caught up in, I don't want to do something because I'm afraid I might not make the grade I want. What you need to do is realize the value in learning something, because you certainly want to be in a very different place after you've gone through all of this than where you were to start off with. And so just keep that in mind. That is not to say that when you're done learning. But my point is that when you're done, and if you are practicing as a behavior analyst, everything's faster. You have to produce results faster. You got to deal with stress faster. You got to solve problems faster, and you have to learn new things faster. That's the only way to keep it turning. There's no time to take to try to figure it out, right? You've got to be a fluent scientist, and then you're actually in a place where you can learn new things and do something with them in real time, independently. And I always thought, when I never like to say made the career shift from special ed to ABA, because I just think they're so intertwined. I think I shared this with you. It's like ignorance is bliss. So when you don't know some of this stuff, you don't realize what you could be doing. And after I learned how to do a lot of this, I just wanted to go back the first 10 years as a special ed teacher and provide compensatory services for all the kids I worked with, because I was like, oh my God, I've got to get to their parents very soon. I got to make up for all of this, because I really was reinforced by learning at that point, not just doing a job. So that's my spiel about the selected reading presentations. Do you have any questions about that, or anything that we can answer tonight to clear some things up?
I want to really quick adding the peer editing of that. So in addition to doing a reading presentation, you're also going to sign up to edit someone else's presentation. Again, we're changing things up, not just for the sake of change, but we think it's going to be a good change, to edit someone's presentation. And this is outlined both in the syllabus as well as on Moodle. You will need to read that chapter as well. All right. And your task is going to be to treat each slide of the person that you are editing as a learn unit. So either reinforcement for accurate and high quality information, or a correction strong enough but appropriate enough to facilitate change if a correction needs to be made. Okay. And this can be a dialogue back and forth. There's lots of different ways that you and your partner can choose to do that. But that's something that I think is going to be really, really beneficial.
Also, while you're editing, you're learning the content of what that person is presenting to you. And if you didn't learn anything, that's an important piece of feedback to give. I know sometimes when I gave you guys feedback on papers and things like that, I wrote things like, I don't understand what you're trying to say. I'm not sure that I see where you're going. Sometimes those types of things. So I've, through the years, I've been exposed to a lot of exemplars of things from students and clients and parents and readings and professionals. So through all of that, if I'm going to struggle with trying to interpret what you've written, then that's when I have to let you know that, right? So by the same token, you're doing the same thing, just at a little bit more earlier stage in everything. So you should learn something from what you're reading from someone. Okay.
Can I ask a
Right.
quick question on
Yeah.
that? Just real quick, to sign up for them, should we just do that by emailing either of you? Just which chapter?
So there's a discussion board forum on Moodle. However, there's like the cross section, kind of knowing who's doing what.
So if I could sign up for like chapter 4, and then if someone else says they signed up for chapter 6, could I like comment on that and say like I'll edit that person's? Is that
yeah. So why don't we do it this way? Let's scrap week 1 from the options, and why doesn't everyone post 2 readings that that you are interested in doing, and then before class next week, Dr. G and I will get together. We'll finalize that list and send that out to everyone. Once that list is finalized, then we can do the editing of it. Okay. All right. Good point. Good point there. Okay. Any other questions about the selected reading presentations? All right. Cool. So next on our list, I believe, is mentoring. Yes. Dr. G, is that next on the list?
Yes.
Okay. Cool. So I spoke with Dr. Cohane last week about mentoring and how, again, kind of the strengths and weaknesses of last semester and what we want to keep and change. And what we decided is that you guys, all of you are in Dr. Cohane's second semester class as well this semester. We decided that both classes are going to fall under mentoring. All right. So you will all be assigned a mentor in EDCI 593. So these are going to be candidates who are getting towards the end of their program. They are either in their last semester or their second to last semester. They have good command of the content that we will be covering in both Dr. Cohane's class and this class. you last semester, because of the minimizing of the data collections and because of the use of the BDS modules, the only real opportunity that you guys had to interact with your mentors was through the research summaries. And I feel that we all felt that while that was a good interaction, that was not enough interacting to really define high quality mentorship. So this semester, we do have more kind of more components, but we are going to combine the mentoring in both of those classes. So all of your material from this class, as well as all your material from Dr. Cohen's class, will be sent to your mentor for review. Now, that is going to be a lot of work for your mentors, and because they have their full course load as well. So it's going to be really, really important for you guys to keep up with your timeliness of your work. And if you are having any difficulties getting work to your mentor, that's part of the mentorship component. They will all have activities related to their strengths and weaknesses as a mentor, their successes and challenges with you as mentor mentee, and I'm going to be reading all that feedback. So I really want to make sure that you guys have an open line of communication with those mentors. Conversely, so if you guys are struggling, they shouldn't be coming to me saying, I can't get anything out of my mentee. They should come to me saying, my mentee's struggling to keep up. We're in communication. I got this. Conversely, you guys need to have the same expectation for them. Their role is to be your first line of feedback before we are able to get you feedback. It's much easier to grade one person's stuff in a timely manner than 14 people's stuff in a timely manner, especially across 3 to 5 courses. So if you're not getting feedback from your mentor in a timely manner, I want you to be in communication with them. And if you're still not getting that, that's when you come to us. All right. So I really want to put, and I'm going to be giving the same spiel to the 593 crew next week. But I really, really want you guys to make sure that you have open dialogue with your mentor, so that both of you have the experience that you need to have.
Think of it as a yoke contingency. So both of you need each other to do well, right? They need to do well by making sure they're doing right by you, and you need to do well by making sure that you're communicating with them, and so on. So I want you to think about the utility beyond this class. It's really important for you to see how we thought through all of this. First of all, as a behavior analyst, you're likely going to be overseeing 10 technicians at least, and you're going to be responsible for providing them with feedback on things that they're learning, right? And so it is a microcosm of what you're going to need to do for those 10 people, and or more, generally is more. And with that said, sometimes there are going to be people that you're having to supervise that you get along with great, and you have a great rapport and relationship, and sometimes not so much. Like, you're not going to have the luxury of supervising people as a behavior analyst, only those people who you like or who you get along with. So it's really important to learn how to work at this level with a multitude of people. And so the best way to learn how to do that is in the structure of a university class, where there's some variables that get to be held constant for you, and there's some stability. And so what we want to see is you guys to have success in that mentor-mentee relationship. That's not necessarily going to predict 100% success on the supervisory side of things, but It definitely is going to give us, yourself as well as us, feedback. If you can't work that out with one person, how on earth are you going to be able to do that with 10 people or more, regardless of what side of the stick you're on? So even though, you know, your mentor is a little bit more advanced than you guys are both in a university program, and you're both trying to become, you know, licensed behavior analyst. And so with that said, um, you know, you guys are colleagues in a lot of ways, and you've got to work well with colleagues. So you want to maximize the advantage of having a peer, right? Provide you with learn units, engage with learn units, because that is an additive feature that we believe strongly is a really important part of the process.
Oh no, I just lost what I was going to say. Nope, it's gone. Oh no, Taylor's question. No, the selected readings do not have to go to your mentors. That is your opportunity to peer tutor each other.
It's your opportunity to start the process. So
yeah.
You're going to get in that class, you're going to already have some experience doing this type of work and having these types of interactions.
Yeah. So any questions about mentoring? That list will come out next week. All right. Okay, so that kind of dovetails into the research summaries. There's nothing significant, I shouldn't say nothing significant, nothing foundational that changes on your research summaries this semester. You're doing, it's the same form. There's always a little bit of confusion at the beginning of the semester about what the mentor-mentee research summary should look like. But just as a quick reminder, you will send your research summary to your mentor. They will send back their comments in a different color. You must respond and edit your own work based on their feedback in yet a different color, so we can kind of see the chain of events, and that's what gets turned in to us. All right. At this point, if any editing or any comments from a mentor come to us unincorporated or unedited, we'll be kicking that back to you unless there's a reason for it that is clearly stated or you've communicated to us otherwise. So we really want to make sure that you guys are reading through and making all those edits and completing the learn unit before you turn those into us. If the goal should be that if you have such a relationship with your mentor, that you are able to go back and forth a couple of times and really get something the way that you want to get it. It has to go back at least that one time. I only need to see that one time on there. But if dialogue happens with you and your mentor outside of your research summaries, outside of your Dr. Cohen projects, outside of your data collections, that's only a good thing. All right. So the more communication that you can have, the better. Now, that all being said, oh, go ahead, Dr. G.
Well, I'm kind of going to throw this out there. It kind of is attached to one of our other topics, but if your mentor is giving you quite a bit of feedback on your data collections, which you'll have more time to do that this semester, then that mentor should be considered a co-author as well as your supervisor, and possibly, depending on how we're interacting ourselves, because as an author of that, if you're going to be a sole author, that means that you have done this completely in a vacuum. No one has given you any ideas or any information or any shaping or any feedback. If you pick up any journal that is published today, and you could go back years on this, I would ask you to find any article that's been published by a sole author. It'd be hard to find one. Okay. I think I saw one very recently, actually, and I was shocked, but it wasn't an experiment or data collection or anything like that. So my point is that if the very experts in the field are really not able to do these projects without co-authorship, then candidates in a master's program probably can't. And if you're struggling with your data collections, one of the reasons might be you don't have enough people that are working with you. Your mentors, ourselves, at least the supervisor at work, and so on. So you want to consider that, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that more in a few minutes. If you're ready to jettison from mentoring, I can do the research summaries piece pretty quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
So good news, there's nothing that will change about your research summaries. We're not changing the format just yet for this semester. So, you just learned it. That format of that framework is supposed to help you extract the critical attributes out of the article. It's supposed to teach you how to hone in on the important pieces and get rid of the things that are just not beneficial, like in anything you read, to you being able to have a thoroughgoing understanding of what the article is about. So the framework is exactly the same. What you will need to do, and this is really important, is when you turn in a research summary, at the end of it, include the bibliography entry for every other research summary that you've done in all of the classes.
Let me jump in on that really quickly. This was a mistake on our part last semester, so I want to apologize about that. I don't think we asked that of you last semester. That is something that we started a year ago fall, and missed having you guys start with right from day one. So I think kind of a week to kind of get it all put together is appropriate. But if you can start putting together just a very simple, you can honestly just copy and paste the citations that you have. But for our class last semester and Dr. Cohane's class, that is extremely important for us, and it's a good list for you to keep in one place of all the things that you have read about for you to reference. We do ask, so the way that we've done this in the past is the course number, which research summary it was within the course, and then the citation. The list organized alphabetically by the citation. Okay? So column A, B, and C doesn't really matter which is which, but so if you want to do it by organization, then column 1 is your citation, alphabetized by first author. Column 2 is the class that you did it for. Column 3 is which number it was within that class. So research summary 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Column A, B, and C. All right. I recommend doing this in as a table, either in Excel or in Word, and then just inserting your current research summary alphabetically where it should go. So inserting a row and adding your whichever research summary you're currently working on based on where it should be alphabetically. Okay. If you need any help with that, go ahead and reach out to me. I'll be happy to help you throughout the week. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. Sorry.
Data collections.
Let's come back to that. Let's do BDS really quick and get that out of the way, and then we can focus on data collection instead. Heather, do you have something? Yeah.
Yeah, should we include our annotated bibliographies from Dr. Cohen's class as well?
No, I don't think so, because you can do a summary for an annotated bibliography and a research summary on that same article. So I don't think you need to include, if you want to, just so that you can keep track of all the articles that you've reviewed in some way, just put, 534, and then instead of research summary number, put like AB for annotated bibliography.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, cool. BDS modules. So a little bit different this semester than last semester. Instead of, what weeks are they? So every third-ish, 3 to 4 weeks, you have a chunk of your BDS modules due. All right. I think it's section G is what we are working on this semester. And you will work your way through that section, kind of in an order related to what we are going over, but it is not as clearly defined content one-to-one between what we go over week to week and what is available to you to complete. Because there are so many modules related to the content for this course, there are no fluency modules required at all. All right. So you are just working on the acquisition, but I believe that there are 50 acquisition modules related to section G. So you will be turning in, aim for 12 or 13 modules, then 13 or 12 modules. That gets you to 25 by the halfway point, then 12 to 13, and 13 to 12 for your number 3 and number 4. I believe I put some caps on, so a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 15. That will prevent you from getting too far ahead, but also not let you get too far behind. Okay, so that does not mean that you can do 5, 5, 5, and then all of them, because that would give you 35 modules in the last one, and you only get graded on 15 of them, and you would not be complete. So make sure you're keeping up with that. Okay. Sound good? Scoring is done the same. I'm pretty sure I added, no, I did not. It's not on there. I will send to Dr. G and add myself a quick scoring tool so that you can plug in the number of runs that you did for each module in that you are turning in, and it will tell you what grade you're getting on that, just so you know what that is right away before we get to that scoring. Okay, sound good?
And my takeaway, my message for you with the BDS is keep in mind that those modules serve 2 purposes. They are the learning tool, and they are also at the same time a measure of how fluent you are becoming. So the engagement in them and the struggle is your indicator that I've got to learn this, and your fluency piece is the indicator of how well you've learned it. And that's why those things are kind of symbiotic in a lot of ways. And that is the case for just about every type of scientist out there. You know, most doctors in medical school have to become fluent with the origin and insertion of every muscle. They have to do those things to a rate criterion before they even go on to other classes. I mean, I'm simplifying this. There are other pieces, but you certainly don't want a doctor who's going to be performing surgery on you that's going to be like, yeah, I know I've got to cut into that valvey thing. No, of course not. It is a predictor. It is a correlate, and maybe even more than that, of proficiency. All right. So keep that in mind. The fluency is the indicator, and I'm going through the modules is the learning piece. So if you don't do well in the fluency piece, it's telling you exactly what you need. I am going to struggle as a behavior analytic professional if I even make it there. That's not to be harsh or critical, or that is providing you with valuable information that's should lead you to a place where you need to seek more assistance in those areas where you're struggling the most.
I want to add to that that the BDS modules were not initially developed to be used through course sequences. They have been adapted over time by BDS and by the universities to be integrated into course sequences. But you know that when you see multiple modules related to the same content, that was part of a study tool for postmasters pre-BCBA exam. That's what they were developed for. But with that came this a little bit more free-form timeline of when how long you had to finish them. You didn't have a 15-week semester kind of crunch to get things down. And the way that they were developed was, you know, do a few acquisition, do the fluency, see how you do, go back and forth, and get better and better between the two. So the fluency was supposed to be your kind of moment-to-moment decision-making about how you were doing on the accuracy, not take it back to back to back to back to back and try and improve your score, improve your time. You're not going to learn that way. You may memorize a few answers that way, but you're not going to learn that way, right? So as you are working with these, and I understanding that you do have the time crunch of a semester, use this as an opportunity not to just blast through, but to critique yourself and what you are strong with. And if you get to where you need to be on acquisition and you get to fluency and you fall apart, go back to Cooper, go back to DTS, go back to the acquisition, retake the acquisition that you've already gotten 100% on. And I believe that those time you as well. And try and go a little bit faster without that pressure and build up to where you need to be. So there is some test taking strategy associated with the modules, but that test taking strategy is a teaching strategy. It's not a teaching, it's not a strategy such that you will pass the fluency modules faster. It is a strategy such that you will become more fluent in the content. All right. So look, I know how many there are. I know how challenging they are. I know how aversive they can be. Now you know what to expect. Carve out time, 15, 20, 30 minutes a day to start working through those. It really has to be habit forming and a process. And I know for a fact that when you guys started getting the hang of it and you started passing in 2 and 3 times, and in some cases on the first try, that was reinforcing for you guys. I know that because I've been there myself. And then you get to the fluency and it's crap and it's all gone, right? The process that you used to get to contact that reinforcement for your acquisition isn't going to necessarily translate immediately into the fluency. That's why they're there, because acquisition and fluency are two different behaviors.
And those of you that I've worked with on programming, that is why when we're doing programming for clients, we always say work on acquisition first and then bring it to a rate criterion, because fluency is the best predictor of mastery of something. And I want you to think about that. Okay.
All right. Any questions about BDS?
I do want to insert one other thing, Dr. Sheeman, and I know we're kind of getting short on time.
Yeah.
What a shocker. Have so much information to share, but I know that a lot of you are involved in different like online groups and social media groups related to learning behavior analysis. And there might be some rhetoric out there about, oh, I used X to study for it, I use Y to do this with, and everything. Well, when you're depending on anecdotal reports to make a decision, that flies in the face of what behavior analysis is to start off with. We don't do that. All right. That is not a good behavior analytic move, is depending on one or two people or something that was done in a non-controlled environment as the end all be all. So up to this point, the data that we have related to predictors show that the use of the BDS modules is one of the biggest correlates with outcomes on the exam, as well as confidence when you first get out practicing and those types of things. There are some other things that I think people are working on right now to maybe add some pieces to this or provide some alternatives to BDS. But the reason why we selected this as an integral part of our coursework is because the data supported it, not because the ABA blog about how to study for the exam or be successful that's what's popular out there. No, that is not the use of good evidence. All right. And it's not behavior analytic. So that is fine to get involved in those things almost as a novelty, but do not use it as a guiding force behind your decision making. All right.
Look at it as the Wikipedia of study tools, right? It might be a good starting place, but don't have it be the only resource you use.
Okay. Oh, Dr. Shemin, I'm not sure if you want to transition next. If you could do the first transition, that would be helpful for me right now.
For data collections?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. BDS information from Cooper or DTS2. It's kind of from both. So it's interventions. Like it's very, very broad. Cooper is a book of principles, but concepts and principles, but it definitely has information about individual tactics. DTS has information about individual tactics as well as, like I've been saying, as these groups of tactics, but it's not exhaustive. So definitely don't stop using Cooper as a resource. Continue to use Cooper as a resource. And I would go so far as to say, before you sit down to take a set of modules, refer to Cooper and see what Cooper has to say. All right. I would go so far as to say, review Cooper, read a research summary, read an article on the topic, do the research summary, and then do your BDS module. So there's, you know, kind of whatever path you want to go, but there is no one resource, right? You while you guys are in school, you guys have the advantage of having every resource available at your fingertips, basically for free. Use them. Okay. No worry, Tanya. Okay, so data collections. Data collections this semester are going to be much more of a focal point than they were last semester. So you will have 3 individual data collections. The third data collection can either be a unique data collection or an extension of an ongoing project, probably your first data collection, but depending, it could be the second one as well. So if you are, and I'll take it 2 steps forward, 1 step back. If you use that third data collection as an extension, the expectation is going to be either that you added another participant, you maybe extended into a second study, maybe you replicated with cleaning some things up. It shouldn't just be a continuation of data from your first or second one. I will say that the caveat to that is if your first data collection has maybe 3 participants that you've worked with someone and are getting a really strong experimental design, and it kind of takes longer to set up. And in that situation, you could extend that out. So if everything is there and it's really robust and you just need more time, that's an appropriate time to just get more data. Okay? Sound good? All right. So the data collections are just like the one last semester. Literature review, methods, results, discussion, graphs, APA style. We're really starting to look for functional relationships, all right? Multiple participants, an experimental design. We want you guys to get the whole thing going here, all right? We are building towards some really robust research in EDCI 599 and 593 next year, but our goal is publishable research this semester. Whether we get there, that's yet to be seen.
I want to underscore this. The reason why is because that is the only way you can determine if your intervention is really working. All right, we're trying to get you in a place where you could determine if your time and effort results in a functional relationship with the outcomes of the children. And unless you do it this way, you can't answer that question. And that's a really important aspect of APA. It's being able to answer that question. So we just don't, what you can't use to answer that question is working with Johnny and he couldn't read these 4 words. And I use this tactic and now he reads those 4 words. So the tactic is responsible for him reading those 4 words. We don't know that based on that information. We have to have a sound design. And the reason why that is important is last time I checked, none of you or anyone else has time to waste doing things that don't result in things that change for individuals for the better. So that is why when you bring all of that together, then you are in a position to have publishable research. And the reason why it's publishable is because you have contributed important information to find answers to things. And it's done in a scientifically sound way.
There's this huge misconception that research does not have a place in the applied setting. And I think that both Dr. G and I could yell at nobody in particular for hours on end about how not only is that farther from the truth, but the opposite is actually true, where you can't have good applied work without the research background, right? You can't have truly definitive behavior analytic applied work without the use of experimental control and design and database decision making, and all these ideas that are embedded not just in the research of behavior analysis, but why single subject research is in Cooper as a book of principles and concepts. You can't have behavior analysis without the philosophy of single subject design. So we pulled a little bit back on that as a fose last semester, but we need you guys to be ready to really dive into those ideas this semester. All right, and we'll have conversations and we'll clarify and we'll talk about all those things. But really start paying attention as you're reading your research summaries to the designs that are being used, why they use those designs, what those designs allow you to do, what those designs prevent you from saying and analyzing, and we'll go from there. But the data collections, we are really looking to be robust. All right. Now, content-wise for your data collections, those are the things that we are talking about this semester. Those are your tactics. Those are your interventions. But we want you to really have an understanding and be able to show how those tactics from an experimental standpoint are effective. Okay? Sound good? All right. What page in DTS is the list of tactics?
104 and 105, I think. And then another one on 109 and 108, I believe.
Okay. So go to those. Look at that list. That list was an exhaustive list when DTS was written. DTS has aged a bit. That is no longer an exhaustive list of tactics. But your data collection topics are on those pages. All right? You are not pulling things out of thin air. You are not making up a tactic. You are using this semester to replicate evidence-based tactics. Okay? So you don't have to come up with the content out of nothing. You don't have to come up with the question out of nothing. We'll do that in a different class. But this semester is all about taking these tactics that you use in your classes, in your clinics, and implementing them in systematic ways, hopefully with multiple participants, but definitely using an experimental design to show a functional relationship, to show their effectiveness. Okay? Okay.
Dr. Shainman, I think that we're 5 minutes to 6:30.
Yeah.
So maybe what we
Sure.
can do is pull up the info from chapter 1 and just kind of read to them some of the essential elements so they can go back and focus on that. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, let's do that, and then we will make sure next week to circle back to chapter 1 as well as introduce chapter 2.
Okay, so let me do a screen share, I think right here. So we're talking about chapter 1 in designing teaching strategies. I think a couple of things we already talked about here, how the precise use of the vocabulary is important to solving problems, that no one's trying to use meaningless jargon. We're trying to avoid meaningless jargon. And to date, no texts have been produced on teaching as applied behavior analysis. This has been the only one and remains to date the only one, which is why one reason we use it for this course. This is a quote that I think we always like to think about because it applies to you, to us, and to all of the people we work with. I'm not going to read it to you, but you can read it. Some of the information that we've shared with you in some of your materials for this week were related to 2 articles that were in the New York Times several years ago. And at that time, I was highly involved with both of these projects out there. And basically what happened is the New York City Board of Ed demanded that fifth grade math scores go up. It was like, everybody, you got to do this, or everybody's going to lose their jobs. So then they worked together with numerous professionals, and I think they probably spent $1 million, and they got a bunch of consultants in, and guess what? The scores went up. Wow, sounds exciting, right? However, there was no way to figure out why or how. So the problem is that the New York City Board of Ed couldn't replicate what they did that resulted in the change, nor could they afford to just do all of the pieces they did because they weren't sure if all or any of those resulted in the change. So it really, I think, shines a light on why we need definitive information. So when we're not going to do things from a scientific standpoint, we'll never be able to figure out what worked. We're not going to be able to isolate those things that will lead to new learning, effective procedures that lead to new learning. We really can't measure achievement. And so we're kind of just in a guessing place. We're just blindfolded trying to hit our target. We may hit it, we won't know what gets us there, or we may not hit it and tend to try to just do the same thing over and over. I think one of the really important points of the book or the chapter is related to understanding teaching as an art versus teaching as a science. And one of the things that, or one of the damaging aspects of teaching as an art is typically that eclecticism for the sake of being eclectic, how we do things, is revered. It is something that is lauded and reinforced. And I really can't figure out why, because just doing a whole bunch of different things is not going to result in better outcomes for people, right? When we're on an aircraft, we want to make sure that that aircraft is flying because it meets the standards of physics and aerodynamics and aeronautical science and all those types of things. We don't want to make sure that the occupational therapist, the speech pathologist, the physical therapist, everybody had equal input on how to fly the plane, right? No. And so just having a diverse input pipeline is not going to help solve a problem. It doesn't solve a problem in anything that we know of, all right? Now, that's not to say that having different types of scientists on something that's related to that problem might be beneficial, right? But it is not eclecticism for the sake of being eclectic. So when you're not scientific, that is really what we see as teaching as an art, and that is how education has progressed through time. I don't want you guys to get confused. If you're in an educational setting, a lot of people appear to be more comfortable with the subject matter for this semester. And it seems to kind of ebb and flow depending on what course you're taking. You have to see that the principles of teaching and learning are the same regardless of what four walls you're in. It doesn't matter if you hear people saying, well, this is not a school or this is not a clinic. It does not matter. Good sound instruction is good sound instruction. And that needs to be the guiding force, not politics or other types of things which have riddled education, normative education, for a long time. So keep in mind that there are four components of just kind of teaching as a science in terms of how it's dynamic, all right? You need a client, which would be your student. You need somebody arranging or delivering the instruction. You need what the content and how it's put together. You need to figure out what you're going to do with it, once it's acquired. And you need to figure out, actually, how do you put that all together? How do you use it as a treatment to teach people things that they didn't know before in the most efficient and effective way possible? I'm just going to kind of hurry up and keep going. I hope that I kind of don't want to lose the momentum here. So if you're going to take kind of the teaching as an art and the pre-scientific teaching and compare it to scientific teaching, we can do a line item analysis. It's not uncommon for teachers or any type of instructional staff who's not trained in the science of teaching and learning, which is the science of behavior. That is the science of behavior. To say things like, oh, he's just unmotivated, or he can't do that because he had a disability, or, oh, don't talk to me about that kid. There's no hope there. He just needs multi-sensory instruction, or that's a home issue. None of those things are unusual, but none of those things provide us what we need to solve a problem scientifically. They actually put the blame on something else that's outside of that realm. And we are the ones with the child, we're the ones with the client. We need to know what we hold in terms of how to help someone. So alternative ways of looking at that, if you're talking about unmotivated kids, you have to analyze, how does reinforcement come into play? What are conditions in the environment that we can manipulate, that we can change? And those would be the motivating operations that just might not be set up. They might not be tapped into. So the current environmental conditions are inadequate, and we determine what those current environmental conditions are. When a child appears to struggle and they have some type of disabling condition, this is why we have to work on prerequisites and make sure that they are mastered and fluent, because it is impossible to get them to do more complex things when the composite skill or the component skill is not in their repertoire. I haven't found anybody that can do something on a composite level, bigger skill, that they're not good at doing the component piece. All right. When we look at why kids are doing certain things, it is highly possible because they learned under the wrong conditions. It's a stimulus control issue. The whole operant is not correct. The operant was formed, but it was all wrong. And I want you to think about this, and this I think is really important. If we, those people who are trained in the science of teaching, are not responsible for what someone learns, how someone changes for the better, for their own well-being, for the things that are important to them, if we're not responsible for that, those people who have the expertise to do it, who would be? All right, so it pains me to continue to see things that don't get addressed, sometimes clinically or sometimes in a school setting, so somebody else can do it. I do not understand, and maybe some of you can shed light on this, when parents are called to pick up a child. Because the last time I checked, the parents are sending the kid to us because we're supposed to know what to do with them. If they would know what to do with them, they would just keep them, right? So I think there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle, and they're not pieces of a puzzle that can't be solved. They're pieces of a scientific puzzle that takes a very thoroughgoing analysis in order to put them together. I think most people are surprised when they find out that there's been relatively little research on how to teach people effectively, although learning in and of itself has been researched dramatically. Those pieces need to be together. They're not separate things. So when we're not analyzing how and what we're teaching to determine how and what someone's learning, and we're not doing that together, we're doing a disservice to being able to advance our knowledge base on how to be more effective with individuals. That's what ABA does. That is ABA right there. So if you get confused about what that is, I think that's a good example of what it is. And for the life of me, please, if you do one thing, don't tell people that ABA means you have somebody come in and work one-to-one with someone. That's not ABA. It might look like that sometimes, but that is not a defining feature of ABA. You could have superior individualized instruction with 35 kids if you know what you're doing. All right, so be very careful at that. And then lastly, we have the characteristic practices of applied behavior analysis. How do you know someone's using ABA to teach? And whether that's clinically or in a school setting, it does not matter. The standards and parameters are the same. We talked about the first one. We know how important measurement is of both behaviors. We need to have visual inspection of data. We need to make sure that what we're using to teach has been logically and empirically tested. The principles and the tactics fit like a glove. We use those data to make decisions about what to do next. A lot of people that get hung up on copious amounts of data, it's not because it's a lot of data that they get stressed out over. It's because it's a lot of useless data. So unless you're using the data you're collecting to inform and tell you, this is how the child responded. Now, let me look at that big picture so it can then tell me what to do next. And if I'm not using that, I am very far away from a scientific approach to teaching. The data should help you. It should give you the blueprint of what you need to do next with the kid. And sometimes that means you do the same thing. Sometimes that means you do it a little bit differently. Let that data decide that. Let that be a really clean, unbiased way to make those decisions. We know that for the most part, our environments can't be coercive. In your free time, I highly suggest you read the book by Murray Sidman called Coercion and Its Fallout. I told you this last semester, it was a book that changed my life. I'm not just saying that to be overly dramatic. It did. There are some things that changed my life. A lot of them have to do with behavior analysis. Some have to do with other things, but it did. And I feel I'd be remiss if I wouldn't share that with you. It's very eye-opening. That doesn't mean there are not going to be coercive things that people have to engage in from time to time. Last time I checked, I can't drive through, on College Drive going 100 miles an hour. I'm going to get a ticket. That's a coercive practice, but it can't be the predominant structure where kids and the people we work with live in fear of what they might do wrong and call that they're ready to learn. That they're not ready to learn. They're living in fear of afraid to do something wrong. And then lastly, we have to make sure that as practitioners of whatever it is we're doing, we are strategic scientists, and that what we use to be strategic scientists are always available for people to see and use. And what I always tell people all the time is when you're using data to drive things, that in and of itself does not make you a strategic scientist, but it is the universal language. And I've seen this happen where we work with English as second language learners and their families who know little or no English. And we talk to them about some complex things and we show them graphs and they get it. If we're trying to teach a child something and it's going up, yay. And if we're trying to help a child reduce something and it's going down, yay. They get that. And that is a really important piece of the puzzle. So that's kind of chapter one. I certainly did not want to steal anybody's time but kind of once I got started on it, I just kept going with it. But if you guys have any time and Dr. Shanman wants to chime in, I think it's quite appropriate now for me to shut up and let him share some information.
No, I think that says it all. No, I look forward to kind of coming back to this next week. I think it's, I can't remember who it is next week. But I think that lays the groundwork for kind of what DTS is going to be about this semester. And hopefully through teaching this content, we can really shape your guys' understanding of what it will mean to be a behavior analyst, and what it will not work with children with autism, not be a teacher, not insert whatever, but what it will mean to be a behavior analyst. And I know that both of us are extremely passionate, not just about the application of the science, but about the science itself. And this is a really, really good opportunity for us to kind of imbue that passion onto you guys. So I think tonight we ran a little long, but I think it was worth it. We covered a ton of stuff. I fully expect there to be clarifications and needing to revisit some things in the next couple of weeks, but take a minute, digest it all, rewatch this if you need, get started on your readings, and we're off and running.
And don't let yourself fall behind. Talk to us at the beginning of the semester about any potential barrier.
Yeah.
Be amazed how helpful we are in clearing up barriers, all right? But we can't clear things up that we don't know exist, all right?
And again, we'll get you the list of mentors next week. We'll sort out the selected reading presentations next week, and we'll be in good shape. All right. One last thing. Be talking to your supervisors now about possible data collection topics. Don't let that sit. And
some of you have some unresolved things from last semester. And if you're lucky enough to be with the same client or a client with the same problem, that might be a good starting point. It doesn't have to be an end point, but you need some momentum to get going. So don't wait to have those conversations.
All right.
Somebody, okay, yeah. Yeah, Murray Sidman is, and I'll tell you a little funny story about poor Murray Sidman. So years ago when I was teaching at the Chicago school, I was talking about this book, and I mentioned that Murray Sidman had passed away. So this was probably 15 years ago. And so that year, the ABA conference was in Chicago. And all of a sudden, I started getting emails from people, Dr. G, I don't think Murray Sidman has passed away. And I was like, really? And I was like, I'm sure he has. And they were like, well, he just presented in a symposium. And so I was floored, and I saw him there, and I had to tell him that the rumors of his death were greatly exaggerated, I confessed. And he recently died, I think about a year ago. So again, in the non-scientific world, I guess people would say that I predicted his death, right? All right, I'll talk to you guys soon.
Okay.